So welcome everybody to our monthly webinar. And the first thing we want to do is make sure you have on your calendars the next events, the things that we're very excited about. We're probably going to name this one in April MCQ questions, or the mystery of multiple choice questions. There is a way and an art about using multiple choice questions, not only to keep people engaged, but to really test their knowledge or make active participation, whether it's open book or closed book. To review, which Jim Chaney is a great speaker, so we're very excited to have him in April. And then in May, we're going to have Jen, who is my partner in crime on the site board for these events, talk about the bad apple effect and interdepartmental assumptions and how to deal with those. So we're going to get more into exactly what that is next month, but I'm very excited for, we've been talking about that one for months and months of putting that on as a future webinar. So we hope you will join us for these upcoming events. Go to the next slide, Sandra. And overall, really want to talk to you about what we're doing with site, all the things that are available. The mentorship group has been very active and is back up and running, and lots of people are both as mentors and mentees. We're very excited about what's happening there. When you sign up or you join the site group, you certainly get part of our newsletters. I think we're collecting those. If you've joined us for this webinar, we're going to get that. We are planning to have the annual conference later this year in person, so very excited about that. But all these things are available to you as a site member. We hope you will take advantage of them. Please reach out to myself or Jen if you have any questions about what's coming up, including the ITP training, the Train the Trainer class, which we got the next one in production and are moving forward with that. So very excited. But moving on to today's webinar, very excited about Sandra Colley, who has joined us, who played the great music and going to talk to us about the learning sprint. And Sandra's just passionate about creating fun, approachable, impactful learning solutions. She's been a past president of site, over 15 years of learning. She's the owner of Rebel Up Learning. So really witnessing learners. I think I've seen this over and over in conversations with you. Seeing a learner hit that aha moment. The light bulb comes on and they see the thing that you want them to learn, and you finally see it. So I think you're going to talk about one of those ways to reach that aha moment today. So I'm going to turn it over to Sandra. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to give you a shout out, Craig and Jen, because y'all have full-time jobs and then you volunteer your time to put together these amazing monthly webinars. So thank you to you and for your teammate, Jen. All right, y'all. It's Friday. It's International Women's Day. We're about to head into the weekend. So let's have a fun together for an hour. How's that sound? Great. Love the reactions. Let's do it. So today we're going to talk about the learning sprint. However, we can't just jump in to it. So let me share what we're going to talk about before we fully jump in. So we're going to talk about what do we know about learners. We'll talk about how do we tend to create training. And there's going to be like a little uncomfortableness today. I'm just going to be honest.
Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Okay, I'm going to just mute that right there, I think. There you go. Why do we keep doing it wrong? So as I said, this make it a little uncomfortable, but that's okay. We're here. We're going to be vulnerable with each other. And then we'll finish with the shall we turbocharge. Okay. So we're first going to talk about what do we know about learners. And I put adult in there. If you've taken Site's Train the Trainer, you know there's andragogy and pedagogy. Okay. And long words, hard to say, but andragogy is how adults learn, and it's different than how kids would learn. So let's talk about adult learners, and let's have a little Friday geek out moment. And I would love for you all to put into the chat, what are some of your top learning theories or methods or things that you consider when you are developing your training programs? There's no right or wrong answer, by the way. Participant-centered, thank you, Sandy. Having a step-by-step guide, good, like job aids, dialogue, interaction. Yep, new versus tenured. Love it. Thank you all for sharing. Think about who is in the audience. Yes. So as you can see here, I don't even think we duplicated anything in the chat. So there's numerous things out there about how we can create learning to be beneficial. I say just pick a few that make sense to you and your learners and think about those every time you are developing your program. So I'm going to share 3 with y'all that I am really passionate about and I try to think about as I'm developing my learning programs. I'm sure you will be familiar with some of these, and if some are new, that's great. Maybe it's one that you'll feel tied to. So Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. I'm sure you've heard of this in some form or fashion. Sadly, what I'm telling you today, next week, you are only going to remember 25% of it. Okay. So as someone who creates learning, you have to make sure that you have additional learning boost to reiterate the information the next day, a week from now, so they can create higher retention of that information. So that's one for me. The next one is cognitive load. And what that says is we only have so much room in our short-term memory. And so if we overload that, we're not going to be able to move the information into our long-term. And I think as trainers in learning and development, we want that information, right, to go into the long-term because I want it to be impactful for time to come. And then the last one that I love is the 70-20-10. And this was an aha moment for me when I learned about this, when I was developing learning, because what this says is only 10% of how we all learn is through formal learning. So like what I'm doing right now, that's only 10%. And what I realize is that, okay, if we really want to be impactful to the learner and their mastery of skills, we need to make sure we're also incorporating that 20% of peer-to-peer coaching interaction with others and that on the job. That's the biggest thing. So we need to make sure in some way they're practicing that on the job or in a role play realistic type setting. Okay. So you all shared your learning theories with me. Now, this is the first tough question I'm going to ask y'all today, and there's a few of these. So here we go. Do you actually align to these when you are creating your own training? Okay. What do you think? Yes or no? Do you truly design your learning to knowing how learners learn? What do you think? Anyone brave enough to put it in the chat? I try to sometimes. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. These are honest answers, and I love seeing that. Thank you for sharing. But also to compliance requirements. Yes. Oh, and insurance, those dang compliance requirements. Am I right? Those always get in the way. Yes. So I think your answers are honest. I have to say that here's a good little Leo for you. The numbers don't lie. And overall, we are not aligning when we create training to how we know learners learn best. And so I have a little Ted Lasso here on this Friday. So we got a 911 call because I'm going to be reporting some truth bombs here. So are you ready? These are going to be hard to hear. Okay. Yeah. Lassoisms. Here we go. Here's 4 truth bombs that whenever I read them, I get like a little knots in my stomach. 75% of managers who are surveyed are dissatisfied. That's DIS, dissatisfied with their company's L&D function. So that means only 25% have business partners who are currently happy with what we are doing in the L&D space. And the next one, our true end customer, are the employees are learning. 70% of them report they don't have the mastery of the skills they need to do their jobs. The next one is the one that like really makes the pit of my stomach hurt. And that is only 12% of employees apply the new skills that they learn in the L&D programs to their job. When I just think about that, you're like, think of how much time, energy, and effort you're putting into what you're creating. And then you see this number that only 12% are able to apply what you are teaching them. Yeah, I see some reactions here. And then lastly, only 25% of respondents believe that training measurably improved performance. Okay. Like when you read those, put in the chat 1, 2, 3, or 4. Which bullet point like gives you the biggest like when you look at those? 3, yep. 4. Yeah, 3 is the one that I'm still like, I feel like I might get sick right now reading through those. Yeah, so I see a lot of you are saying 3, all of them. Yeah. So 3 and 4 look like the biggest ones for a lot of us, but in general, these are all making us feel like a little sick. Yeah, and Mary says that ego, yes. So let's be honest here, right? We are all smart, experienced L&D individuals. So we know what we need to do. But I'm going to tell you a little story, okay? And this is the tale as old as time. So the main character of this story, her name is Sally. All right, we've changed some names to protect the innocent here. And Sally is a learning and development consultant, 15 years experience, exceeds on performance reviews. She's got all the certifications, continues her knowledge, including CITE's ITP, Insurance Training Professional. So if you're not familiar with that, check it out on CITE's website. And has all the skills, learning theories, knows about Agile, ADDIE. So when you look at that, you're probably like, dang, Sally is going to create an amazing training program, right? Is that like what y'all are feeling right now? Like, do you want a Sally on your team? Yeah, I mean, on paper, we all want a Sally. So let's talk about the scary truth. Are you all ready for a little scariness on the Friday scaries? So this is the story. The best laid plan, okay? Sally, in December, she shared this amazing training plan for 2024. The business, they loved it. They're like, this is going to be the best year of training we have ever had at our company, okay? January 11th, she gets a call from her business unit partner. And they say, oh my gosh, Sally, we had one person do something wrong. This is an emergency. We have to have this training done right now. And Sally is like, I want to be a good business partner. Yes, let's forget everything that we talked about our 2024 plan, throw it out the window, and let's work on this instead. Because I'm going to make my business partner happy. And then Sally is like, I'm going to forget everything I know about learning theory and what's the right thing. And, I'm just going to create this like 1-hour e-learning because that's probably the right amount of time. Everyone thinks 1 hour is good. And I'm going to put everything in it, even if it doesn't help the objective. But you know what? I'm going to put a test at the end, because if I put a test at the end, then that's going to show, they learned the content and that they've mastered the skills, and everyone's going to be happy. Okay. Then we send out an email and we say, hey, participants and learners, so exciting. We have this like awesome compliance training. It's an hour and you have to do it, and you have to do it in 2 weeks. And now come the grumblings, and now come the emails. You get the VPs and the senior directors saying, Sally, I don't really have to take this, right? This isn't for me. And you're like, yeah, you do. It's for you. And then you have the participants who are calling people and saying, hey, I completed this, but it's not showing as completed. And you're like, sorry, you got to take it again. It's not showing up in the system. So now everyone's basically upset about this whole scenario except for the original person. And finally, after 2 months, you get everyone through this 1-hour training and you think, we did it. We did it. We got it done. And now no one's going to look at this training ever again. People are frustrated. And what's happened to your great plan that you had? You spent 3 months of your time and your resources creating this one-off e-learning, and now you're maybe a quarter, 2 quarters behind in implementing the thing that you knew was going to have an impact on your actual training. Okay, what do you think? Does any of this story, doesn't have to be all of it, ring true to you? I see a yes. Anyone else? Any part seem familiar, or a portion of it? All of it, yes. Oh yeah, okay. So I have a confession. I am Sally. I don't know if you got that, but that's me. Okay. I have done this before, but did you see? I know so much, right? How come I keep doing this? Like, why? Every year, year after year, I'm like, this year I'm not going to do it. Sandra, don't do it this year. Don't fall into it. I know that was a big twist, wasn't it, Mary? It was me. It was me all along. So yeah, there's a reason. You all just admitted it too. So I want to hear from you all, and I can share my experience about this too, but we know what to do. We know the learning theories. We know what works. So why do we keep creating things if it's not the right way? I'd love to hear from y'all. Expectation from management, 1000%. They have a priority and they're like, this has to get done. I don't care about anything else. You need to do this. Yes, business pressure when people say, yep, we just jump. We want to make people happy, right? We're fun people. Yeah, we want to make everyone happy. And so if the business says, I really need this, you're like, oh, this will be a quick win. But it's never a quick win, is it? It takes time. You get SMEs, you get everyone involved. And so a few of the things that I have realized, and you've shared some of them. First of all, we have limited resources. And so if we say yes to one thing, we don't realize that we've now given up all of our resources. Maybe some of you are a training department of one. You've given up all your resources to work on this one project that's not going to have an impact on the business. There can be misalignment with the business. One of the biggest things that is a game changer is when you can become a consultant to the business instead of an order taker. And you can point them back to the training plan and ask them to reprioritize now, because with this new thing, what thing do they want to drop off that was already aligned to help you achieve business impact, right? And I know we mentioned this is insurance, so there are compliance requirements, but at times it tends to seem that we overemphasize compliance training, and then all of the other really important skill-based training tends to fall to the wayside. And that's not good for any of us. You saw that stat that talked about, I forget what it was, like majority of people don't feel they have the skills they need to do their job. That's because a lot of times we're spending more time on compliance training and not enough time around building people's skills that they truly need to be effective in their job. And then let's just be honest, it's just difficult now. We have a lack of employee engagement. With the remote workforce, it's gotten even harder if that's where you're at. Learners are extremely busy. Like, unlike kids, right? The pedagogy, they're in school all the time. That's their job to learn. It's not people's job to learn anymore, right? That's part of it. You're trying to help them, but a lot of times they just say, I don't have the time to do that, even if it's an hour learning. And then managers. We need manager support. And oftentimes they are not just managers anymore. They are project managers. They are project leads. And the management part has now become such a minor part. It's hard to get their buy-in to add another thing to their plate if they can't see the value. And then I see we have a in the chat. The question is compliance a training issue or a management issue? Yes. If the rules and training are available, why are they not being carried out? Yes, yes. I have a lot of fun stories about getting that manager buy-in and accountability, and we can talk through some of that when we get into the learning sprint, which is a great lead-in. So, all right, are you ready? What if I told you there was a way that you could align your learning to help with the forgetting curve, which means increasing learner retention? It can be something the managers can buy into because it's less time on their plates. The learners can do it at self-paced, and it brings in peer-to-peer and on-the-job interaction. What would you say about learning more about that methodology? Let's go. Yeah, I like that. Let's do it. So here we go. Let's jump into the learning sprint. Okay. I sometimes call it a skill sprint, but if I say that, it's the same, interchangeable. Just saying that if I have a little slip as we're talking through here. So what is it? It's a structured way to accelerate the learning and the skill development. Okay. And really the big thing behind a learning sprint is it applies principles and deliberate practice in short time, short bursts to help you achieve quick mastery of a particular or a single skill or knowledge area. Okay. So I'm going to kind of let you digest that for a sec as you look at this. And I wish I could run as fast. That guy looks extremely fast. So I'm going to do a quick poll here. And I'd love to hear from you all. Have you previously designed and or implemented a learning sprint? And maybe you're not sure. Maybe you're like, I feel like maybe I did, but I don't know it was called that. You know, that's okay too. So we have about 50% right now. Let me see if we can get it up to about 80. All right, we are even over our goal here. So let me share it here. So the top response was not sure. And that is completely fair because based on the definition, you might think you have, but not under this term, learning sprint. And some of you said no. So we have no one who's officially sure. So let's go through this more. And then we'll see if maybe you're like, oh yeah, I have done that. So let me first tell you how you would go about designing a learning sprint. Okay. And I will tell you, the first step of a learning sprint should be the same first step as any learning. Anyone want to guess what that is? Yep, needs analysis, yes. So starting with the end in mind, which is, yes, a needs analysis. Yes, desired outcome, thank you. All those are great answers. Any training program, including a learning sprint, you need to think through, what do we want to achieve by the end of this sprint, and be specific. For example, say someone comes to you, your business partner, and they're like, we really need training for our claims adjusters on negotiation. And you're like, sounds great. How will we know this has been successful? And they're like, I don't know. They'll know how to negotiate better. And then you say, okay, how will we know at the end of this program if they are negotiating better? Okay. So we really want to pull those out of them to make sure that by the end of this, as a training or a learning department, you know that you've helped achieve the success that this program has had. If you are not able to show your value as a learning department, you're not putting yourself in a great place to be. So make sure you have those specific outcomes. I love to tie them, if I can, to a specific result of the business. But if that's not possible, make sure you know what else you can measure it off of. Okay, the next one, determine timing. So how long is this skill sprint going to be? And there's no right or wrong answer on the timing. There's a lot of factors that can go into that, like how much time do your learners have to contribute to the learning? How intense is the topic that you are doing, right? And figure out what is that time of the skill sprint. Then you want to start structuring within those weeks the content that's going to go into them. And make sure we are tying those back to what we just talked about, right? The objective. People will ask me the question, how long should the training be? What do y'all think? How long should a training be? I mean, yeah, 10 minutes, right? Until they apply it. I say it should be as long as it needs to be to achieve the objectives that we set out to do, right? So if you are as long it needs to tie back to the objective, because sometimes, especially if you have some SMEs and they're like, we need to include this, we need to include this, we need to include this. And I'm like, but that doesn't tie back to what our objectives are. Cut it out. So I say make it as short as possible while achieving the objectives, because we know people have a hard time engaging with content. You want to keep it as short as possible while making it as effective as possible to reach the objective. And then allocate time. So make sure you know how long each of these pieces is going to take. And a key piece is communicating that out. Make sure your learners know week by week how much time they need to set aside. I always say, hey, this is how much time to set aside per week. Whether or not they do that, it doesn't matter. But at least if they want to put time dedicated on their calendar for that, they can do it. And thanks, Sandy. You're always great as putting some summary into the chat. I appreciate that. And then monitor and adjust. It's not going to be perfect, right? No learning program is ever perfect. If you have created one, you need to do the next site webinar, okay? Because we all need to learn from you. So be ready to monitor and adjust the skill sprint. If it's an 8-week program, you're probably going to have to fix something along the way, and that's okay. I always say fail forward, fail fast, right? It's better than not doing this at all. Okay, who wants to see a sample? Would it be helpful to see a sample? And if you say no, that's okay. Just like tune out for the next 5 minutes, okay? All right. So if you said no, just enjoy your 5 minutes of peace, quiet. If you said yes, let's take a look at one. So I chose a very generic soft skill, but I know there's a lot of people who are trying to build up soft skills. So listening skills, okay? This is a 4-week, right? We decided it's a 4-week skill sprint. So the first activity is that 10%. Remember the 70-20-10? We decided we're going to kick off with that 10% formal learning, a live interactive webinar that's going to talk about the 3 levels of listening, passive, partial, active. We'll do some role plays to make sure they get the idea on how to do it. And then we're going to close out the week with another skill sprint activity. And this one is peer-to-peer, okay? So before week 1 finishes, they're going to pair up with one of their peers. And it's simply, hey, Heather, you're going to tell me a story, any story. And every time I get distracted or I hear a comment in my head and I stop listening, I'm going to make a tally. And then at the end, I say, oh my gosh, I got distracted 5 times during your story. And we can talk through what are ways to continue to be an active learner. And then we switch. So that's our peer practice that week. Thanks for being my partner there. Week 2, this is an individual exercise, a reflection. For some learners, a reflection time is really beneficial to their learning and digesting of information. And this week, they're just in charge of creating a listening log. And that means every day, every other day, they are documenting instances that they found themselves having effective active listening and ineffective active listening. So that's their task for that week. In week 3, they are bringing that listening log to their team meeting. So everyone's bringing theirs to the team meeting. And then their discussion as a team is around what went well with listening, what didn't go well. Let's talk about how have you worked to improve? What things are you doing? Are you putting your phone on do not disturb during meetings? Are you closing out of your email when you're on a customer call? Whatever that is, and then you can have that peer-to-peer team interaction. And you'll notice we talked about timing and how time is such a valuable resource. Team meetings should be hopefully on the calendar on a weekly cadence. So this is no added time on the calendar for the participant or for the manager who is very time burdened, okay? Time burdened, I don't know if that's the right word. And then lastly, week 4, the learner comes up with, okay, based on what I've done so far and learned about myself, I'm gonna pick one thing that I'm going to continue to work on with regards to my active listening. And then they share it with their manager in a one-on-one. And guess what? One-on-one should be scheduled as well. And so this is also not any additional time on anyone else. And hopefully if you have a successful one-on-one, there's 5 to 10 minutes spent on development towards the end about what they're going to do. And now you can add this as an item that you can continue to come back to as a leader and see their improvement in this space. Okay. So if we go back to the learning theories we talked about, right? The forgetting curve. You had that initial kickoff, but now you're reiterating it week after week after week. And so it's helping continue to drive that principle home and that retention. You'll notice that we are doing short bursts of learning to help with that cognitive load. And we also are doing the 70-20-10. You'll notice there's peer engagement and there's on-the-job things that they are needing to do. All right. We are going to jump into an activity in a sec, but before we do that, I want to pause and ask you, what questions might you have based on the design or the sample skill sprint? Okay, I see Morgan asked, after week 4, how does the trainer know what happened or tell if it was effective? So as far as the trainer, one of the things that we'll talk about is accountability. I tend to put things, if you have an LMS, you can do in the building of a curriculum a week by week, and they have to go in and either acknowledge that they did it, or you can actually have them put their listening log into the LMS. And some of these other pieces, like how many times, so let's start with the pair up activity. How many times did you tally and what was your takeaway? That could be in your LMS so you know that it happened. And keep some of the accountability week by week built out on the LMS. If you don't have an LMS, I've also used things like Microsoft Forms. You send a weekly form and then they can put the information in that way. You can make it as high tech or low tech as you want. Also, if you feel that your managers are sufficient to hold them accountable, you can do that. I have done that, and I tended to be a trust but verify for myself and put it so the trainers can show the value. And how will you know if it was effective? Again, at the front end, we would have wanted to know, what do we want to see out of this skill sprint? And, you know, whatever that is, you would then want to be able to measure that at the front end and then at the back end. And that's how you could communicate that value back, whether or not it was impactful. Good question, Morgan. What other questions do y'all have? Okay. For those of you who said you maybe had created a skill sprint, now that you kind of see the definition, how to design it, a sample, how many of you now would change your answer to yes if you want to put that into the chat that you've done something similar? Okay, I see no. Okay. Okay, so some of you are now like, yeah, I have done that. That's great. So the next piece that we're going to do, use of LinkedIn Learning. Yeah, that's great, Mary. Is we're going to do a quick breakout room. Because why? I did the 10% here, but I need y'all to now get with your peers and talk through something. And don't get scared. These are all really nice people, I promise. This will be really great for you to meet some new people in your rooms. Here's what I'm going to ask of y'all. You're going to get in your room and you're going to talk about what are the advantages and the disadvantages. I'm not saying this is the perfect solve all method. So let's talk about the ugliness of it as well that may come up, okay? So you're going to talk in your group, what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages of a learning sprint versus traditional methods? And when I say traditional methods, I'm talking about the classic 1 hour e-learning, the 4-day on-site program, or maybe it's just the lunch and learn webinar, whatever that is. I want you to talk about the advantages and disadvantages of those. I'm going to ask the most tenured site member in your group to be responsible for sharing back what your group had, okay? So when you get into your groups, you're going to have to say, hi, my name is Sandra. I have been with site for X years. If you're new, welcome. And then that person will know who is the most tenured and they'll be ready to take some notes and share when you get back. I'm going to give you about 6 minutes because that gives you a minute for introductions and then about 2.5 minutes to spend on the advantages and the disadvantages. What questions do you all have? Okay. For my facilitators out there, you know when I break you out, someone's going to be like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, right? They'll be like, I thought she said this. So I'm just going to make sure. Any questions? Okay, so I'm going to create these rooms and I'm going to open them. If you have any questions, feel free to send a chat and we will help you out. Here we go. I will see you back in 6 minutes. See.
I think everybody went into one.
Looks like we have Leanne and Rosemary. Let's move Heather to. Okay. We'll bring them back.
You should at least one that doesn't join.
Yeah, I think there is someone
Who either, you know, they might not be there at the moment. They might have multitasked. And...
Yep. That's okay.
Okay. You do what you got to do when you got to do it.
That's right.
No, you're a great speaker.
Oh, thank you, Craig.
Should I pause recording?
Yeah, otherwise you can splice it out too. How many of y'all like started talking to your fellow site members? Then you were like, oh my gosh, we have 2 minutes to come up with advantages and disadvantages. Maybe? No? Okay. You guys are much more task focused. Good for you. All right. So I would love to hear what y'all came up with for advantages and disadvantages. So who's my group one? I'm guessing it's either Jim or Cindy, who's the most tenured.
I think it would be me. I almost bailed because I'm like, I think I'm the most tenured person.
We lost a few people. They're like, I'm out of here. I don't want to do that. Yeah.
I'm gonna have to be a jerk. So
Well,
okay, we had a great group, lots of discussion. And we decided that the advantages of a learning sprint would include it forces you to be focused on the outcomes and be disciplined about
mhm.
how much training you're trying to stuff into the bag, right? It's probably more effective. And we also were curious and thinking that it's probably better for small group learning than we were wondering how does it really translate to if you had a really big audience. So that was sort of the
Disadvantage.
advantage. And then for disadvantage, just the difficulty in driving enthusiasm and motivation in learners in general. This type of learning requires a lot more effort on the part of the learner.
Mhm.
And we would guess that it's probably more expensive than traditional, PowerPoints delivery.
Okay.
That was it.
Awesome. Let's give a round of applause for group one and Cindy. Woo! Okay. Which group wants to go next? Or I can volunteer, but if you want to volunteer. Sandy? Okay. Let's hear. Group two.
All right. What's interesting, we came up with a few different things. On the advantages, we thought it was well organized. It was very intentional and very, it used chunking, and that we like the follow-up aspect piece to it and the manager's involvement where the team meets and discuss their learning journal. And then as far as disadvantages, less time for issues that might arise, and that the planning part of it probably takes a little bit more time as far as, all the calendaring appointments and follow-up pieces that are involved. And then there might be a challenge with getting agreement on the objectives and then the specific activities that might meet those objectives in the execution of the sprint.
Great. I like how we have some new ones.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Group two. All right. Let's see. I see Heather, you have your hand raised. You were in group 4. Do you have some new additional items that your group came up with?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about some of the things that other people talked about. But one of the things that we did talk about is most of the folks in our room were part of smaller organizations where they were kind of one person show, and or maybe 2 or 3 people shows in their areas. And there would need to be holistic organizational changes in the buy-in from leadership to support the pieces of this that a leader would have to support. So I kind of asked the group of like, what would be your ideal world here? Like, what if there was an ideal world and we get what we want, where the leaders have the ownership, accountability, and buy-in to do the support of the learning journey and the learning journals and all those other things. And you were responsible for the creation design piece, the touch points in between that, and then the follow-up and the end point of it. And like everybody was like, yes, absolutely. They feel like that this would be an incredible way to structure things when you're talking about trying to do the sprint style learning. But for most, and I would even echo this, being in a larger organization, it would be very, very difficult to have the influence, to have leadership buy-in to make this change unless you could demonstrate immediately that it had massive impacts on the bottom line results of learner retention and capabilities. And that's just the reality of the world that you live in insurance learning, is that everybody wants results now, today, yesterday, 38 years ago. And so you're the sole responsibility for making that happen. So you have to be able to back this up with data and intelligence so that the organization continues to buy into the idea that this is the way.
Yeah. And I'm just taking some notes so we can come back to them. But yes, we're definitely going to talk about some of these when we get through all the groups. So thank you for sharing that, and good job, group 4. Group 3, I know we've talked a lot. Any other items that y'all want to add that maybe we didn't touch on?
Sandra, I don't know if we are group 3, but we haven't gone yet. So we're going to be group 3.
Okay, you
So
are
we
now
really
3.
talked a lot about what's already been said. I can tell you almost, we were from smaller organizations, and Dawn and I are from the same organization. We're about 7,500 people. But we kind of said engagement. It's quick bites, it's easy digestible bites. You revisit it every week. And so we thought, it would drive engagement in the right organization to kind of continually visit topics. One of the downsides that we thought it was limited use in terms of the content you could deliver via this style of learning. I do a lot of litigation training, how you handle, complex mass tort. I cannot in any world teach that via sprint learning. And so we thought, there are certain topics that this would absolutely be beneficial for, and some topics we just genuinely felt it couldn't be applicable.
Yep. And that's totally fair. So thank you all for talking with your groups about these and coming up with them. But as you said, there's no perfect learning solution. I'm not here to tell you the learning sprint is perfect for every scenario. So a lot of y'all, and I know you're like, oh my gosh, you're in learning and you have this much text on a slide. I just did this in case you wanted to see the full on amount. So trust me, I know this is too many words. But as you talked about in some of yours, you talked about it can be efficient, right? 15 minutes a week is less time than if you're having people go fly in, do a 4-day class somewhere. For certain individuals, that's motivating, that it is not a ton of time and that they know they're actually going to get more engagement from it. One of the things that's on here and that I have seen that participants love is if you are in an organization that is more remote, they don't get as much interaction with their peers anymore. And so when they know that you're building in that peer-to-peer, not only do they get to see their peers and learn with their peers, but it's motivating and it can help the culture and help them because now they get to know those people better. And the more we know people, the more we trust them, the better that efficiency of that organization is, which is some side effects of having that built-in peer-to-peer. Collaboration, we talked about this, the 70-20-10, it's building in the parts to the team meetings, into the peers. So you're not just doing that 10% and then like, we did it, we're done, great. We delivered that one session, the business is happy. And then it can fit into their daily learning. I mean, most people have 15 minutes in their day. Let's just talk about, the distractions that we have and things like that. You can easily fit in 15 minutes after the initial kickoff. I want to look at some of the other items that you shared here in case I miss anything. Okay, so let's spend a little bit more time on the disadvantages because I do want to talk through some of the items that you shared. So accountability, I will say as you look at this, I don't know that any of these are that different from any learning event. It's just as Mary shared, the type of content. And one of the things I have on here, it may not be ideal for all topics. If you have a very complex topic, you may not be able to do this because it's going to require a lot more, if you will, like hand-holding and hands-on learning with an expert. So I totally agree. Not everything is going to be, all content is perfect for a skills sprint. Accountability issues. Again, I mentioned the LMS or something. I do the trust but verify, have something that they have to input into the end of the week that they completed what that task was. The great thing about most learning sprints is putting that time on their calendar throughout the week is on them. And so they can do it whenever fits best into their schedule versus say you have it, if you have different time zones, right? Oh, great. Everyone always does it at my lunchtime because I'm on the East Coast and everyone's Pacific. Or great, I have another 5 o'clock meeting because they're doing it at, 2 o'clock on the Pacific Coast. So it does provide them that opportunity to learn when is best for them. We did talk about learner or manager buy-in, and that came up, I would say a lot, actually. I have found, and I would love to hear from y'all who shared that, when I introduce a learning sprint, yes, most managers say, I just want to do a 1-day, 5-hour class, and then my people are done and they can get back to their job. Like, is that what y'all hear from your people or something in that manner? Yeah. So if now you're going to them and you're saying, hey, we're going to do an 8-week program, they're like, no, that's not going to happen, right? They're like, you can't have my people for that long. So what is so key for the leader buy-in is that education. So when I propose a skill sprint to the leaders, I walk them through the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. And I say, that's great. We can do this one-time training. And guess what? Your team's only going to remember in 6 weeks or in, 6 days, 25%. And guess what? In a month, they're not going to remember anything. Do you realize we're doing negotiation training every year because no one ever gets it because we do the same 1 hour, same 1-day class every year because then we don't do anything with it, right? And then we talk about the 70-20-10. And I say, you are only wanting us to do this 10%. But if we only do that 10%, just know you're missing out on 90% of how these people learn. The biggest thing that I see, and I share this with leaders, if we don't do that 70% of on the job, that's where people gain the confidence to actually do what they've learned. Learners will not do something if they don't have the confidence to do it, and then it goes to the wayside. So you can tell people as much as you want, but until they get that confidence through that coaching and through that on-the-job practice, they're just never going to do it. So we need to build that in to the program. So I will say I have had leaders who have said the same thing that you all are hearing. And as I have talked them through and educated them on learning theories, and then I tell them, hey, by the way, it's less time for you because you're already building things in to your team meetings that are on your calendar and to your one-on-one. So by the way, it's actually less time for you as a leader than these other programs that are 6 hours in 1 day. So that's how I've been able to overcome some of those discussions when they're like, I just want a one and done, because you all know that's not effective and you're them just do the same trainings every year for the same people because they're still making the same mistakes, if you will, or there's the same opportunities year over year. And then as far as results, that again goes to the first step for any learning, right? We need to make sure we're tying it to some data, as Heather said, some result, and then we need to make sure we have the data wherever that is housed to back it up or figure out how we're going to come up and measure that. And there are methods like Kirkpatrick, Phillips, that you can tie it to the commitment level to apply to the job, have a manager review them for behavior change. So there are other ways you can show it that doesn't necessarily have to be tied back to a number. And that obviously is like a whole nother training on Kirkpatrick and things like that. But there are methods you can do that don't tie it to a number that can show the managers there is actual behavior change to your training. I'm trying to look at some of the other ones you said. Now, I know you meant, this is one thing I do want to bring up. I heard a few people say, I'm just in a department of one, or I can't do this. This is actually fairly quick to, this is my opinion, so could be wrong. If you're a department of one, as I think, Heather, this is what you were alluding to, I will say, hey, I need to get a SME or someone to kick off this big topic. But then you're really just curating these experiences with these goals. And it's not as hard to develop that as you would think. In fact, I've been able to develop skill sprints fairly quickly because you're just saying, meet with a peer, have this discussion, share what you learned. It's really not a ton of content creation except for some of those bigger webinar type sessions. So I would challenge that thinking a little bit. I will say if you do have a large organization that you're rolling it out to, yeah, that would be a little bit more difficult if you have like 8,000 people you're trying to put through one. But for the most part, the skills that you're training on, you want to have that be on a team by team basis. So for example, I've done them for like sales teams, and then you have about 80 people going through them, but they're still having those individual discussions within their teams. So it's still a smaller, intimate environment when you get to that part of the skill sprint. It's peer-to-peer. So really the only major part you would have is that like one-off kickoff knowledge download, and you could do multiple sessions or something like that if you needed to for scheduling reasons in that regard. Okay. Last one. I'm going to do one last poll here and then I'll open it up for any last questions you might have. What do you think? And you can be honest. If you're not, I'm not going to do that. It's never going to work. It's totally fine. So are you ready to give it a try, or maybe think about giving it a try in some form or fashion? And some of y'all thinking. All right. So let me share back here. So we have yes, and then not sure. And that's totally fine. There's a lot of things to think through, right? I would say if you're going to do it, start on something really easy, like a 2-week program, and just give it a try. And then you can see how it works, make adjustments. And if that's what you need as like a test and learn, and share it with management to get that buy-in, that can be a great starting point as well. All right. Well, with that, I do want to just say thank you all. You are a great group. Thank you for being open to the breakout rooms on a Friday. I know that's a lot to put that on y'all. So thank you for doing that. Hopefully you met some new individuals. And what questions do you all have? I see that Sandy put some tips in there. Questions? Okay.
One thing I'm thinking about,
Yeah.
since I'm kind of in a consulting role and I need to get better at like outreach through LinkedIn or social media or whatever, but this whole idea of learning sprints, and you have mastermind sessions, and you have people get together and they learn things and then they go out and try it. This would be an amazing thing to do with a group that has the objective of improving in a specific area, and then just take them through this process. So that's what I'm thinking in my mind. Anyone want to join me? What do you want to learn?
And it sounds like, Sandy, you're actually like describing doing a learning sprint in of itself of doing this topic. I mean, you said we meet, then we maybe talk about it, and then we would do that.
Yeah.
So you're literally talking about almost
Right.
doing it within a learning sprint type format, which is great.
Yep.
All right. Anything
Sandra,
else?
is there a amount of time that
Go ahead.
that is this considered a sprint? Like, what's the greatest amount of time you would consider a sprint?
I mean, at some point you don't want the learners to be like, this is going to go on forever. So I would say in my mind, like the longest is like 8 to 9 weeks if you have like a really complex topic. But I mean, it can be as short as, 2 weeks, whatever that may be. And some people, like I always say, like for onboarding, you could do it in a more intense fashion, like some topic every day for 15 minutes. If you have people who are full into their careers and working, you probably wouldn't want to do that intense every day, right? Because that's too much for someone. But for onboarding, you could definitely do a more intense 2-week sprint of something every day for 15 minutes. Thanks, Justin, for the shout out again for Happy International Women's Day. Yeah. Enjoy the day. I told my husband, I'm like, are you forgetting to say something to me today? And he's like, I said, Happy International Women's Day. He's like, oh, I'm so sorry. So you can do that too if you want. All right. Well, thank you all again. Here's my contact information. So if you have any other questions or follow-up, I always love to support my favorite organization and its members. Feel free to reach out, email, or social media. And I love spending my morning with y'all on the Pacific Coast, I should say. So great to see y'all. And Craig, anything else that you want to close out with?
No, thank you, Sandra, for making this a good, fast-moving, good, intense, information-filled event. Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, bye, everyone. Have a great weekend.